What is the threat of artificial intelligence to education?
Well, I think there are many more opportunities, unrivaled opportunities to give all young people, regardless of the schools they're in and the parts of the country they're in, and indeed the learning difficulties that they might have, extraordinary opportunities for enrichment, for real-time assessment and marking, to free up teachers to spend much more time with young people because a lot of the heavy lifting will be done by the machines. But there are also very real risks, risks of obviously plagiarism, risks that all the difficult parts will be taken over by the technology, which is only in its infancy at the moment. The rate of change is going to be incredible over the next 5 and 10 years, as we've already seen. And fear of deepfakes, of moral damage to young people, which is already quite considerable with social media, will be magnified because of the extraordinary pace of change. And schools, teachers, parents, we're all bewildered.
It's interesting to use that word. You talked there about the use of deep fakes. Is that something that you're seeing in your schools amongst young people? Like, it almost feels to me like another tool of bullying that people could use.
Yeah, I mean, it is extremely invidious and dangerous how manipulating the technology can be, because it will understand. I mean, as we know, when we're shopping, when we're looking on the internet, the personalization of the material that comes to us will become far, far more sophisticated. And young people are young. They can't negotiate the world very well. And so the opportunity for them to be manipulated, bullied, brought into practices, drugs, all the rest of it, is very worrying to parents, very worrying to schools. So what we're saying is, look, the ed tech companies have a lot of profit motive. They're making enormous amounts of money out of the technology, that we can't make them go away. We have to ensure that we provide parents, schools, teachers with really good information about what is wholesome, stimulating, good AI, and what people should be aware of, because government, who really have caught up in the last few months, but they're still behind the curve and they never quite understand what happens in schools. Parliament doing some good work, but they take a lot of time to come out with their statutes and recommendations. We have to take it into our own hands, schools, to ensure that human intelligence is at the very heart of schools. Artificial intelligence will never take over from humans as long as we put human intelligence first and don't just try teaching young people with tests and exams in a way that is giving them the skills that the algorithms will always be better. As Martha Lane Fox was talking about, we need the skills in this country. The skills are the interpersonal skills, the human skills, the problem solving, the entrepreneurial skills, which are not being sufficiently done in schools because we're just narrowing everything down to exams. So I think that there's a lot here that is enormously exciting, but we have to get ahead of it in the interests of the children and the many, not the few, parents, teachers.
You mentioned the interview with Martha Lane Fox. She was also very strongly saying that the government shouldn't be looking at international students to try and get net migration figures down. What's your view on that?
Well, I think universities are doing, I mean, I would do, wouldn't I? I used to be a vice-chancellor. Are doing a superb job. Government have failed to provide the leadership of the sector. Universities should be right at the very heart of that drive for productivity that Martha was talking about. But without a more benign attitude from government, if government stays obsessed by numbers of overseas students who so enrich this country and the economy and Britain's relations with the world, it's just looking at the wrong thing. Government really isn't smart about the leadership of education.
That's interesting.
In either higher education or school education. They're obsessed by narrow data, whether immigration numbers or whether exam results. They really don't get what education is all about. And they certainly don't get AI sufficiently yet.
That's really interesting to hear your thoughts on it. I'm interested, as the head of Epsom College, because there has been a bit of a debate about private schools, particularly among the Labour Party. Keir Starmer saying that he would abolish the charitable status of private schools, levy VAT on fees. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think that this initiative here that we're talking about is cross-sector between, it's jointly led by Epsom and by a multi-academy, trust-born academy, is the example of collaborative work between independent and state schools, which I think is the model for the future. Personally, I don't think that getting rid of independent schools or putting so much financial squeeze on them will actually help state schools. I think working together side by side is the way forward. And I think that that is what we'll see, because if independent schools have to close, there simply aren't the places in the state schools to take all those young people. So let's have a much more imaginative policy from government and a much more forward-thinking policy for government. Let's see both sides of that education divide working much more closely together. That's always what I've wanted to see.
You think there's a genuine risk of independent schools closing then?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be particularly those which are serving areas where there's lesser income, where the fees are already lower, where the margins are much tighter, and where those schools are serving, really serving their communities and giving parents another choice. I think it's good that we don't have a uniform education system, that there is choice and diversity within it. I think that is a strength of the British education system. It's why overall and historically we've had such a good education system. So, who will see? Look, Labour out of power before 1945, before 1964, before 1997 has always made threatening noises about wanting to get rid of independent schools. And of course I understand that argument. But when it gets into power and the practicalities bite in, that they do other things and they go off in other areas. I think much better to try and raise the standards of all state schools, not the least by government understanding what AI is and how it can give a top quality education to all, and to have both sectors working together. I think that's a better way myself.
And just finally, you talked a bit about the choice that parents have. Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, said she wouldn't send her children to private school because she wants them, in her words, to see the world as it is. Do you think she's got a point?
Yeah, I think that a lot of Labour ministers historically have always sent their children to independent schools. There are some superlative state schools. I think the best of state schools are better than independent schools, but I think also that's a little bit unfair to some incredibly imaginative independent schools, which are doing things to stretch and give their young people opportunities, which there simply isn't the time often in a state school to do. But look, that's her choice. She's exercising her choice. Good for her. And personally, we send our children at different times to both state and to independent schools. We have a fantastic state sector which has got better and better.